welcome to episode 67 of the Life in General podcast. My name is Nick.
I'm Ian.
That's just you.
Yeah, I went basic.
You went basic today?
Yeah, I'm old school today.
Old school Ian. Well, you are old, so.
Yes.
And I do want to say, hey, this is episode 67, so our podcast has now, we now have as many episodes as Harvey Weinstein's been alive.
Oh, that's something that means absolutely nothing.
I don't know. This is the first 67-year-old I thought of. But,
oh. And he's 67 now?
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's it.
That's unfortunate.
Well, I thought it'd be funnier than that. So go to hell, Ian. Asshole. But
no, I mean, just it's unfortunate that I don't know. I don't like Harvey Weinstein. I never liked him.
No one really does. And
yeah, he's always kind of a dick.
No one listens to our podcast, so it's like it's all the same.
Indeed. Indeed.
Any questions or comments, you email us at lifeandjoelpod@gmail.com. We're on Twitter at LIGpod. We're on Facebook, Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, all the normal places.
Yep.
Do I sound like really bassy to you for some reason? I don't know why.
Not really.
No more than normal?
Sound the same as usual, you know.
Well, anyway, so this episode... Well, real quick, I do want to say that Record Store Day was last week, last weekend. And we're not going to talk about that this episode because we're going to discuss Record Store Day for our vinyl episode next month.
Yes.
So look forward to that.
Some of our the things we got. And
yeah, we'll go over some of that stuff and some other stuff after that and some more stuff after that. So
sure.
So
it'll be a complete episode. I mean, we're not just going to say, "Hey, we went to Record Store Day. Bye."
Goodbye. I had an interesting adventure, but we'll go.
Yeah,
into all that
you had more than I did because I was there after work.
Yeah, so that'll be out May 5th, I think, is our vinyl episode for May.
That sounds about right. Mm-hmm. Or music episode for May. Right, because we don't just do vinyl episodes. We do music episodes.
It'll probably more than likely be vinyl episodes.
Well, it will be. I mean, that's what we tend to talk about a lot. But I mean, we have music episodes.
Correct.
One music episode.
Today is a music episode.
Exactly.
We're going to talk about music today. I know we've talked about music a lot on the show before, but
yeah, we do about one a month, give or take.
Yeah. But it's. I don't know. I always like putting lists together. We've done other lists too. I think we've done movie lists before.
Oh yeah, tons of lists.
We did a really interesting president's list. If you'd like to go back and listen to us, argue senselessly about presidents, which was
I wouldn't say it was senseless, but
it was.
We argued heavily.
It was somewhat circular, I think,
and to some degree, yes, it was.
And going back and listening to it, I don't know. I listened to part of it not too long ago. At times we were like arguing about the same thing.
We have a tendency to do that. We really do. I mean, through the entirety of our friendship, there's been many times where we've spent hours arguing about something, and then we just sit there and go, "We're arguing the same side from different angles."
It was an interesting episode. If you want to go back and check that out, I don't remember what episode number that was or when we released it, but
it was a while ago. But yeah, I think it's. I know it's an episode that
probably about a year ago. I think we did.
It's an episode that I know one of our fans goes back to and listens to quite often. Actually,
really?
Yeah, he's listened to it like 5 or 6 times.
That's funny.
Yeah,
I mean, it was a good show, but it was very yelly.
Well, some of our better shows have been yelly, I guess.
Probably not this one, but so generally when we do these like top 10 kind of episodes, we kind of go through and make a consensus list. I don't think we're able to do that anymore with like music shows because our music tastes are
slightly different,
very different.
Yeah. Well, I would say slightly. There's a lot of overlap.
There is. You're right. There is some, and I'm sure probably when I go through my list, my top 10 list, there's probably 3 to 5 you'd probably agree with.
Right.
And the other ones you'll think are probably the worst pieces of trash ever fucking made.
Yeah, maybe.
But
it's not impossible. There's a lot of shit. There's a lot of trash out there.
I just think first overall, so we're gonna do the top rock albums of the 1980s. It's something that we both grew up in the 80s. Mm-hmm. Ian's slightly older than I am.
Just slightly. But, we're talking, 18 months? Not even?
Hey, you're still
not even.
You're still an old bastard. But anyway, so It just like the diversity of the 80s, I think overall makes it a very difficult era of music to kind of put together in just a simple like
even within
10
rock.
albums, yeah. Because I mean, yeah, new wave and all the other stuff that came through the early 80s that progressed into like hardcore metal. I don't know. There's a probably the 80s more so than any other era of music. There's been such a heavy progression from the beginning of the decade to the end of the decade.
That I probably can't argue with. I mean, you could argue that the 70s were very different from 70, 71 to 79, 80, but yeah, I think 80s, it was definitely...
To go from kind of like the beginning of new wave and the death of disco...
And even kind of the death of punk kind of early on in the early 80s. Yeah.
To where grunge was in 1990. I mean, that's a very
you're right.
Very steep curve.
I would agree with that.
So I think that right there kind of makes it a difficult era to kind of go and break down. But and that's kind of why I went into like
let's not do a top 10.
Let's not do like a top 10. I'm going to go through like what I think my top 10 is.
Right. I have a lot more.
Yeah,
albums,
Ian's,
but I actually came prepared.
I just want to say this is like the fifth episode that Ian's ever been like prepared for in this show.
Well, I don't. Maybe more than 5, or maybe less than 5. I don't know. Whenever we do lists,
you always have.
I always have something. Yeah. But this is the first time I think I've ever been like, or maybe the second time that I've ever been more prepared than you.
Probably.
So, or like slightly more prepared than you. So, but anyway.
So I don't know. Once you throw out some titles,
the list I made, I did kind of chronologically. So, and then I have to admit that the list I did based on my recollection of these albums, the songs that are on them, they kind of stand out and kind of represent the 80s rock for me. And this is gonna even more just for us, Detroit area born people. This is Bob Seger, Against the Wind.
Oh yeah, of
that
course.
Was 1980. I mean that.
I didn't realize that came out in 80.
Yeah,
I thought that came out in like the late
70s. I did too, but it was 1980. So yeah, that one really kind of stands out. Again, we're not doing like top 10s or anything, but there's a lot of hot hit songs on that album that are still played on the radio. The Clash, London Calling. I didn't realize that came out in 1980.
Yeah, that I did. Which that's a really good album. I mean, it's got a couple of like obviously London Calling's I think probably their best song.
Right.
That and Rock the Casbah is probably their two most notable songs that people remember. I know obviously London Calling's on that album, but
I think Rock the Casbah came out a couple years later.
I think it might have.
I can't remember either.
But. I don't remember. It wasn't on that album, but anyway. Go ahead.
Pete Townshend's first official solo album.
I was never a fan of his solo music.
I liked a couple songs off Empty Glass. That was his first one. What's the one that's still played a lot today? I can't remember the name of it. It still gets a fair amount of radio play today.
Yeah,
and it was a big hit single.
Okay,
and I really like that song, and it does. When I hear it, I think my mind harkens back to the 80s for sure.
I would say the music that came out in the beginning part of the 80s definitely had a very, I know it sounds stupid to say, but like a very 80s sound. When you think of like 80s music, I think of like Devo and things like that from the early part of the of the decade. I think really kind of.
I think mentally we define 80s by the earliest stuff of the 80s.
Yeah.
Does that sound accurate?
I guess.
Okay. This one you might have on your list, Back in Black, AC/DC. The first.
I had that number 10 on my list, and it was almost like a tribute, I think, almost to Bon Scott.
Yeah, and it was the first album without him.
Yeah, it was the first album after his death, and Brian Johnson, from what I understand of the story, he actually got the job because he sounded so much like Bon Scott.
Right, and he wouldn't take the job unless he talked to Bon Scott's mom.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
He talked to her and made sure it was okay with her before he took the job.
So, but the funny thing is, I think Back in Black, is AC. And I'm not a huge AC/DC fan.
Either.
I think it's their best album.
I like Razor's Edge too. Just songs on Razor's Edge, and I like songs on Back in Black. Overall, though, I'm not a big AC/DC fan.
Yeah, but yeah, I definitely had if I was putting together a top 10 list, I would have Back in Black.
Yeah, just because it's very indicative of the 80s, for sure. And that sums up my 1980 list, because I tried to grab a few albums from each year.
Yeah.
The next year, and this is more, this is personal, but it's also, it's kind of defining in the sense of the era to a degree of change from the 70s to the 80s, was Ozzy Osbourne's Blizzard of Oz. It was his first solo album, and it really automatically, right from the get-go, kind of defined him as the heart of Sabbath because of how good it was. And, you know, we were able to see the separation and say, okay, Ozzy wasn't just this guy in the band who was, you know, the front man. He was the heart of the band in terms of vocals and persona and everything.
And I think during the later stages of Black Sabbath, I don't think that was really known or understood until...
It wasn't. In fact, Ozzy was... I mean, to Sabbath's credit, they put up with a lot of drug use. Yeah. He wasn't showing up to rehearsals. He wasn't showing up. They actually, on their last album, Technical Ecstasy, they actually had another singer on that album with Ozzy.
Oh, really?
There's a couple songs Ozzy just wasn't around to record.
That's crazy.
So, or at least conscious enough to record. But that being said, you know, once he got... I'm going to say it was Sharon who really kind of got him focused. It didn't get him off his drugs or anything, but it got him focused.
Didn't happen until years later.
Right. And arguably, he lapsed several times since then. So,
speaking of Ozzy real quick, have you seen Dirt?
No, I have not.
I guess they've got the scene. So Dirt, if you're listening and don't know what Dirt is, it's the
biopic
Netflix movie about Motley Crue.
Yeah.
But they've got the scene in the movie where Ozzy snorting ants. So
okay. Well, that was kind of a defining moment for Motley Crue, was being on tour with Ozzy.
Yeah.
So,
I wonder if they've got, and I haven't seen it either, but I wonder if they have the scene in the movie where Glenn Danzig, Henry Rollins, and the rest of the Misfits like chased Motley Crue in their...
Henry Rollins. Oh, yeah, you said Henry Rollins. Yeah.
Chased them
Black
down the
Flag.
Sunset Strip.
Yeah. No, probably not. They look like pussies.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you've seen pictures of Henry Rollins and Glenn Danzig from the early '80s, you'd probably run from them also.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'd probably run from Glenn Danzig now because he's still a big guy.
Yeah, but he's
looking old. He's like old. Schwarzenegger, big, old. You know, not so terrifying.
And speaking of Glenn Danzig, did you see the video from? I want to say it was a couple years ago, but it was backstage. And him and some other guy like get into this shouting match, and the other guy fucking lays Glenn Danzig out with one punch.
No, I've never seen that.
One punch just lays him out.
Yeah, that's all it takes for most people.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter how tough you are. If you don't see it coming and they get you, you're down.
He's probably someone that probably hasn't taken a lot of punches in his life. Or not in a while.
Well,
not in a while.
Yeah. We'll go that far.
Yeah, I'll go that far, because you're probably right. Earlier days, yeah.
He seemed like he didn't much care, yeah. Next would be, well, why not? Motley Crue's first album, Too Fast for Love.
I was never a fan.
The first two Motley Crue albums I enjoy a lot.
Really?
After that, I have a hard time. Until you get to Dr. Feelgood, and even that, I wouldn't say is as good as their first couple albums.
I like Theater of Pain, and I like Dr. Feelgood.
I don't like Theater of Pain
no?
at all. There's maybe one song or two songs tops that I like on that album. Girls, 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 same thing.
Yeah, I never liked Girls.
And Dr. Feelgood, I mean, I would say I like probably half of the album, but see, that's
a really good. I've got it on vinyl.
It's an album that, for me, I think I like it more from the nostalgia part of it, because I was, coming into that age. I was 11 when that came out. I was getting that. I was 11 when it came out, and it was kind of getting to that age where I started to understand some of the subtle innuendos in some of the songs. I was starting to kind of understand those things, and it was kind of starting to appeal to me in that slightly very early pubescent era, because that's what Motley Crue is. That's what they're singing to is, teenage boys, essentially.
Yeah.
Rush's Moving Pictures.
See, that's another band I never really got into, and I know a lot of people that are big fans of Rush, but I never could get. I'm
a big fan of Rush. I like Rush a lot, but this is kind of the defining moment for them, and it kind of defines how music was moving in the 80s from the 70s. Uh-huh. Moving Pictures was the most pop album that Rush had ever done. Before that, they were still kind of dabbling in that progressive rock era, of the 70s. They were still dabbling with that, doing long-form songs. This was short-form songs with nice little hooks, very pop. And there's a lot of hits. Limelight, Tom Sawyer, I think, is on that.
Oh, is it? Okay.
So, I mean, that was to me, that was like the defining moment of Rush becoming a pop rock group to a degree.
Uh-huh.
Which any band that survived into the 80s had to have their pop moment. Yeah. Any band from the 70s that went into the 80s, they had to have a pop moment. And that was that for Rush, I think. And that was 81. Next would be Foreigner 4.
Which I actually had, I've got on my honorable mentions list. Because it's an album that...
Even if you don't like Foreigner, you know songs on that album.
Yeah. Because
that's how it is for me. Because I'm not a big Foreigner fan, but there's some good songs on there.
Jukebox Hero on it. I think Urgent is on that album.
Urgent is on it, yep.
So there's a lot of really good, notable songs on that album.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, that's another one that's, not really, something I would go to, but we're aware of all songs on that album. And then Ozzy's, this is kind of a two-part. This is the second part of the Blizzard of Oz things, because they were recorded kind of back to back. And it was the two albums that Ozzy did as a solo, first two albums he did as a solo artist, Diary of a Madman. And it was the second and last album with Randy Rhoads. Arguably, I think Diary of a Madman's a better album than Blizzard of Oz, personally.
I don't know if
I would go that far.
I don't know if I'd say that, but
I would say how's this? The good songs that are the really good songs that are on Blizzard of Oz are slightly better than all of the songs on Diary of a Madman, but Diary of a Madman has consistently more better songs, more good songs.
Okay, I can
so
see
how's
that? I'll see you there.
But I think those two albums together kind of define that transition I was talking about from Sabbath to solo. And then Shout at the Devil, Motley Crue. And again, similar thing. Those first two albums, there's something about the sound that they had that was slightly different than everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And they hadn't achieved that pop level yet, but they were still popular.
Yeah.
Because I think Theater of Pain, which was the next album that came out for them, that was pop rock. It was hair metal.
It was.
And I liked the separation between those first two albums, the sound, the roughness, the seediness of those first two albums that it just kind of comes through from being like an early band. I don't know. Something about it just really works for me. And I guess from there we jump to, I don't know why I skipped 82. I don't have anything from 82. I guess I could put out...
If I scroll through here, I don't think I really do either.
For 82... off the top of my head, I can't think of much. Jethro Tull's Broadsword and the Beast came out. That was it wasn't a huge hit. It wasn't a hit in the United States, but it was a hit overseas. Specifically in Germany, it was a huge hit. It was number 1 in Germany for several weeks.
Was it? And
a lot of people claim that that's the album that kind of started their 80s thing. I don't know. It's a good album. I like it. It's got one of the coolest album covers ever, in my opinion. But that's about it for 82. Then you jump into 83. 83's got some good hits. U2's War.
Yeah.
Michael Jackson's Thriller.
Of course.
Def Leppard's Pyromania. David Bowie's Let's Dance.
Mm-hmm.
Metallica's Kill 'Em All, their first album. Billy Idol's Rebel Yell.
Okay.
And Yes, 90125.
That's
another one like Foreigner, where I like Yes a lot. Yes is one of my top 10 bands, but that was their defining 80s album.
Yeah, which
Odor of a Lonely Heart was their single on that.
Okay,
which
I know the album.
Yeah, but that album overall is really good for a band that went from like making 30-minute epic songs to more, condensed 5-6 minutes.
I think
songs.
they almost had to in the 80s.
You did.
Those long form songs just didn't.
They didn't work in the 80s. They could have. I think they could have, but it wouldn't have worked for mainstream radio.
Yeah.
Like it did in the 70s because there was just too much else going on.
And it didn't really work in the 70s.
True, because they would always cut them down.
Yeah, the radio edits.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I mean, they were still popular as far as like sales, whereas in the 80s there was just. It's kind of like now where why buy a whole album when you can buy a couple tracks off of iTunes kind of a thing.
Yeah.
It was kind of the same thing. There's so much out there. Why have to sit and listen to one song and really put your effort into it when you can listen to 5 albums in the same amount of time?
And I would say that going back to Pyromania real quick, which is I actually had as number 9 on my list. I believe that was the first album that Mutt Lange produced with Def Leppard.
It would make sense. It's very different from their previous albums, and you can see the progression from that to Hysteria very easily.
Because if you listen to High and Dry and then you listen to Pyromania, which High and Dry is a really good album.
It is.
It's nowhere close to what Pyromania is.
Right. Well, I think Pyromania just has more focus.
Maybe.
Than High and Dry.
Maybe.
Does.
And
because High and Dry is kind of all over the place.
Yeah. And that might be partially Mutt Lange's.
I would think so.
But at least his influence on the recording process.
Yeah. And then Metallica's first album. Metallica's a huge band. They've been. It's not a great album.
That's another band I think they didn't get musically really good until later.
There's a progression though. It's obvious. It's obvious progression. You listen to Kill 'Em All,
exactly.
And then listen to Ride the Lightning. You can see the progression occurring.
Oh yeah, and I think progressively they got better each album.
I agree.
Because Ride the Lightning is it's an okay album. I mean,
I really like.
I'm not a huge fan of it.
Yeah.
I think Master of Puppets is
a much better album.
Much better album
by far. Yeah.
And Justice for All is even better, I think, than. Or at least on even playing field
with Master Puppets. I would agree with that because
and then the Black Album I think is better than everything.
Well, the Black Album is really the
after.
culmination of becoming a worldwide band, band that is going to sell out stadiums worldwide.
Yeah.
And not just because before that they were a metal band. You're going to sell out metal concerts, you're going to sell out metal arenas, but you're not going to sell out worldwide. You're just not. But the Black Album that made them a worldwide band. And you can, I think I've said it before, where Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning is like their thrash, and Justice for All and the Black Album is more like their universal kind of where it's more acceptable and more accessible, not accessible. And Master of Puppets is right in the middle, and it really encompasses. And Master of Puppets is on my list, but that doesn't come out till 86.
86, yeah.
So, but. It's kind of right in the middle, where it kind of has a bit of both ends of their spectrum. Mm-hmm. So to me, Master of Puppets is my favorite Metallica album because it's so centered right in the middle of those 5 records. But
I would say after the Black Album, I think there was a steady decline.
I think they lost sight of who they were, and I don't think they've ever truly found it again.
I think there's been glimpses.
Yeah, absolutely. Death Magnetic and Hardwired to Self-Destruct
they're decent albums.
They're decent albums, and they're the closest to seeing what a Metallica should be or is.
Or was.
But yeah, it's possible they'll never get it back, and that happens to most bands. That's most bands.
It does.
So, not much else. I mean, Let's Dance by David Bowie, that's huge. I mean, that song was huge.
It was a popular album, I think, just, you said, because of that song.
Right.
But I think outside of that, though,
it was showing David Bowie's kind of ability to just kind of flow in and out of mainstream.
Yeah.
Because as he did in the 70s, he was so eclectic. Every album was extremely different from the last.
Oh, yeah.
And once he came into the 80s,
it was intended to be that way, too.
Exactly. And I think once you came into the 80s, where other bands would fail at it, making the transition, he excelled at it. Yeah. You could listen to those songs and know that's Bowie, but they were still part of what was going on overall in the 80s.
Yeah.
Then you jump into 84, Prince and the Revolution, Purple Rain.
Yeah, that's
actually huge for 84.
I just picked that up on vinyl not too long ago. And I actually forgot about that. I forgot about that album.
I've been wanting to pick it up. Van Halen's 1984.
See, that's another band I was never a big fan of.
I agree.
I mean, I think,
well, and I guess I should clarify that it's a band that I was never a big fan of from this album before that. I don't like their early stuff. I like this album, and I like their Sammy Hagar stuff.
Yeah. And
I know I'm in the minority. When you go up to a Van Halen fan, you say, I like the Hagar years.
Yeah,
they'd be like, fuck you, you're an idiot.
I wouldn't say that. I think the David Lee Roth stuff was better.
I disagree. I think musically, the band had more focus.
Maybe, but I don't know.
Their identity was very clear with that era, whereas with Hagar or with David Lee Roth.
Or maybe it was just as the years went on, I realized how much of a cocksucking asshole Eddie Van Halen really is.
Well, that's true,
and maybe that's what kind of colors my
It
perception.
It does me too.
Because
and David Lee Roth is not an angel either.
No, but everything I've read about Eddie Van Halen, he seems like a real bastard.
Right. No, I agree.
And I mean, Eddie Van Halen, if you're listening to this, sorry.
Right. Well, I mean, the truth hurts. You know.
At least that's what the overwhelming perception of him is.
Right. Well,
and you're right about David Lee Roth.
He's kind of a dick too.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was never, and that's the thing, because you can overlook Eddie Van Halen being a dick if David Lee Roth is a dick and David Lee Roth is kicked out of the band or leaves the band.
I think a lot of David
when Sammy Hagar left the band, it was because Eddie Van Halen was a dick.
Yeah.
Because everything that we know about Sammy Hagar, he's not a dick.
No. And I think a lot of the stuff, a lot of the issues David Lee Roth has had over the years with his personality, I think a lot of it is probably chemically induced.
It could be. At least
that's the way it seems.
I do know that when Sammy Hagar and David Lee Roth went on tour together, it was kind of like the anti-Van Halen kind of tour.
Yeah.
Sammy Hagar had a lot of issues with David Lee Roth.
Not that.
And again, it was like you said, personality and showing up, on time. It's a job. But yeah, 1984 by Van Halen. It's a seminal album for that year.
If I had to pick a Van Halen album, it would probably be that album to listen to.
Yeah, for me, it'd be Firm Off Car.
But see, like I said, I'm not a big.
I know I'm not
fan of that period. But
I'm not a huge Van Halen fan either. But 1984, it's got Jump, Panama, Hot for Teacher. I mean, these were big songs.
That's what I said. If I had to pick an album, that's probably, if I was to buy a Van Halen album, it would be.
I have it on vinyl.
Oh, do you?
I picked it up used for $5. So,
yeah,
that's about the extent of how far I'd go for that. But I also have 5150, OU812 as well, because those are Hagar, the first two Hagar albums.
But speaking of 84, I mean, I know you're not a fan of this album, but I don't think you could talk about the year 1984 without talking about Born in the USA.
It's on my list. I do have it on my list.
I mean, by the way, I've got a real quick question. Is Bruce Springsteen pissing on the American flag on that cover? Because that's always kind of been the way it looks.
There's a lot of debate of the whole meaning behind a lot of that album.
Well, the meaning of the song has been
debated considerably.
Twisted over the years, because it's not this big, like, pro-USA, I love USA song.
It was kind of an attempt to comment on how the troops were treated after Vietnam. Yeah.
Because it was more of them like saying, "Look, I was born here too." Right. That was the whole "Born in the USA" part. Was like, what the hell is wrong with you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you look at the album cover,
I guess you could.
It looks like he's kind of pissing on the flag. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be. I never paid that close of attention to it, but you can't argue. Kind of the same thing as 1984 by Van Halen. It's kind of it's indicative of that year.
Yeah.
I mean, those songs like Dancing in the Dark, Born in the USA, those are songs that really kind of defined that era.
Yeah, keep talking for a second, Ian.
Okay. But I'm not a huge Bruce Springsteen fan at all. You can't argue his contributions to the world of music, but as far as the music that he plays, it doesn't really define anything that I personally like. Sorry, everyone. I had to get up and actually go grab the record so Ian can see this. Yeah.
Tell me he's not pissing on the flag.
Well, I don't see any urine, so
no, but it looks like so his hand.
It does. His one hand's down, his other hand looks like he could be holding his dick, pissing on the flag. I get it. When you said it, I pictured it. It was.
But yeah, I mean, it really is. If you run down through the album, it's definitely
As far as Bruce Springsteen goes, the songs on this album are the songs that I would like. Yeah. I do like of his. So, yes, I not being a Springsteen fan, if I was going to own a Springsteen album, this would be it.
Yeah, I actually had Born in the USA as number 8 on my
Glory Days. I forgot that was
Glory Days is on there too. Yep, that was the video
Downbound
with
Train. Yeah, I mean it's a good album overall. I mean, again, I'm just not a huge Springsteen fan.
That was the video with Monica in it.
Yes, it was. Dancing in the Dark was.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
I thought she was in.
No, she was in Dancing in the Dark because he brings her up on stage and she dances.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. Damn it. Okay. Whatever. That wasn't on there.
No, that was the same year. Did you know she was in a show called? It didn't even last a full season. It was a show that it was on right after Knight Rider. on Friday nights. It was called Misfits of Science. And it was essentially like...
That sounds like something Courtney Cox would be in.
Well, what it was all these people with like superpowers.
Because she was in some really bad shit.
The main character, this is how 80s this show was. The main character was a rock star, essentially a Bruce Springsteen kind of guy who gets electrocuted on stage by his guitar, and then he can like shoot lightning bolts out of his hands.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah. It was pretty cool for 1984.
Sounds like
But Courtney Cox was in that show.
What else do you have for 84? That's the
Ride the Lightning, which we've already
talked
talked about.
The only thing I had on my list was just Born in the USA.
Ride the Lightning was the only other one I have. Oh, Stay Hungry by Twisted Sister.
Oh yeah, okay, I forgot about that.
Yeah, that's a good
album.
For that year, that's the top 10 of that year for me because I love that album. And the song We're Not Gonna Take It obviously is a huge hit, but I remember that when it was first being played on the radio. I remember hearing it and knowing and being aware of that song as a 6-year-old kid, you know.
You say a lot.
Why?
I'm just noticing it.
You can see it on the...
I can see it. I can see it on the...
All right, well, whatever.
Screen here.
I don't care.
I'll cut them out.
Yeah, you can cut the ums.
Yeah, I do normally.
The only other one I have for 84 is... I said, I didn't say
Okay.
No, Bryan Adams' Reckless.
Okay.
He's got Summer 69.
Yeah, that's another good album,
Heaven and all that. Run to You.
Uh-huh.
That was a big album for me. It's just as a kid. I had it on cassette. I listened to it a lot. I don't know why. I can't really define why I like that album. Because it really wasn't even... At that time period, I wasn't really sure of what kind of music I was into.
Uh-huh. I don't think anyone really did at that time.
I was starting to define my musical tastes. Starting to. And I think that was kind of... I was 6. I was 6 in 84. So I was really just starting to define my tastes and see where my tastes were going to go. And the 3 albums that I had that kind of played into that was Bryan Adams' Reckless, Wheels Are Turning by REO Speedwagon.
Oh, yeah, that's another good album.
Which I don't know if that came out that year or not. It's not on my list, but it kind of was part of that. And then I don't remember the name of the album, but Night Ranger, whatever album had Sister Christian and Rockin' in the USA on it. For some reason, those kind of just... Those are like those early days of when I had my own music that I was listening to. I mean, Michael Jackson, Thriller, of course, was there too.
Wheels Are Turning was 1985.
Okay. So, I mean, it's still that time period, but... You know, really, 84, 85, those... I hadn't really truly defined my musical taste yet. So, yeah, that's all I've got for 84, and I've only got one album for 85. Obviously, 2 if you put Wheels Are Turning.
Yeah, we definitely have Wheels Are Turning in there.
And it's
which I think is fantastic.
Dire Straits, Brothers in Arms.
Yep.
For 85. And then, I mean, again, it's one of those albums that everyone was kind of aware of.
It was a big album that year.
It was huge, yeah. Walk of Life,
yep.
You know, I Want My MTV, that kind of... all that stuff. But that's all I've got for 85. 86.
We talked about Master of Puppets already.
Yep. Europe, The Final Countdown.
Yeah, that was a great album.
The Final Countdown by itself, the song,
is a world-known
song,
yeah.
Yes. For me, it was Rock the Night. That was the big one that hit. That was the song that when that video came on, because it was always Final Countdown was played, but when Rock the Night came on, I was like, oh yeah, on MTV, back when they played music.
Yeah.
And that was
many moons ago.
That was the first vinyl record that I had that I owned that was bought for me that wasn't a hand-me-down record.
Really?
Yep.
I think mine was Thriller. I
had Thriller on cassette.
One of my earliest childhood memories is I remember and I think it was one of those plastic. It might have been one of those plastic Fisher Price record players.
Uh-huh.
But it was sitting in my room listening to Thriller on vinyl.
I had the same memory, but just with a cassette. I had it on cassette. My dad got it for me for Christmas in 83, Christmas of 83, I guess it would have been. For Thriller. Where were we at? 86. Oh, yeah, but Europe's The Final Countdown was the first vinyl record, like I said, that it was purchased for me specifically, rather than just being handed down
Gotcha.
to me. 86 was actually kind of a big year. Bon
was.
Jovi, Slippery When Wet.
Which actually I had number 2 on my list.
Yeah, that was for, again, a cassette. It was a cassette purchase. 5150 by Van Halen. First Van Halen without David Lee Roth. First one was with Sammy Hagar. It's a good record. I really like it. As far as, I'd probably still go with For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge as their best Sammy Hagar album. Second best would be this one. Peter Gabriel, So. They had like Sledgehammer, Big Time on it.
Yeah.
Those videos are just really, the music videos for that kind of define that album.
He was kind of an interesting kind of character.
And well, this is Peter Gabriel at a time when he was really toned back.
Yeah.
I mean, this is an older version, an older, more mature musician, and not going to the lengths that he went to in the 70s.
Yeah,
I'd say, because his stage persona in the 70s
coming out as an asshole.
Well, as like a hemorrhoid, yeah. Pushing out through, on stage.
Yes.
Wearing a.
If you're ever interested in some of his
look
antics,
at
back.
Genesis.
Yeah.
Pre 1975.
Yeah. What?
Yeah, because he left in 75.
Was it 75?
Yeah,
I thought
it
was 77 he left. But.
He left in 75, but
okay.
77 might have been the first album that Genesis made without him.
Maybe that's what
I could be
of.
wrong. But go back to like say 1969, 70 Genesis, and look at live video of him. It's fucking crazy.
Yeah, he did some really crazy shit.
Yeah, I mean, it even makes some of like Green Jelly and stuff like that seem tame, in my opinion. But what else? Paul Simon's Graceland.
Yeah, I mean, that was another
it's
album.
A good album.
It was an
it's
okay
a good album, but it was
also.
But it had big hits. It had, I'm looking at the overall
I see
universal likes of rock.
I see where you're going.
We're popularly accepted kind of albums, but also we're good.
I would say though,
overall,
going back real quick to Slippery When Wet.
Uh-huh.
Obviously, it was a huge international success.
It was, yep.
But there was a lot of fans. There was a lot of Bon Jovi fans that really hated that album because it was so different from the music they had created before. And Bon Jovi was kind of slapped with that mainstream kind of tag.
Right.
Because a lot of their fans felt that they were just trying to create radio-friendly hits, which, I mean, obviously they did.
Yeah, but they already did in 84 with their first album. They had Runaway was huge on the fucking radio.
It was. But, I mean, I'm just saying that's what a lot of fans felt like at the time. And obviously they went on to sell whatever, 12 million copies or whatever
it sold
it was.
huge.
So, I mean,
like I said, I had it on cassette.
I think I had it on cassette also. I've got it on vinyl now. But.
Yeah. I've been meaning to get it just to have it. It's not an album that still holds up for me.
Really?
Yeah, I've listened to it as an adult, and it doesn't have the same.
There's some of the songs are still really good.
Yeah, I mean the songs. It's not the radio songs either. It's some of the the deep cuts.
Not granted. Back in the day, I mean, I would put the cassette on and listen to it front to back.
Me too. Absolutely.
And you're right to that extent. No, not really. Some of the songs, it's like, I could do without.
Right.
But there's still some really great songs in that album.
So, no argument there. This one's kind of a personal opinion one. It wasn't huge, but it was big, and it was Alice Cooper's Constrictor. But for me, what makes this kind of a defining album of that year, but also for Alice Cooper, was this was the first sober album.
Yeah, it was definitely his return.
It was, well, I wouldn't say it was his return to popularity, because we get to 1989. That's when he got huge.
Well, I know, but that was.
But it was his return. He hadn't toured for 3 years.
Yeah.
He hadn't recorded an album in 3 years, and this was the very first album he had recorded since 1969 sober.
Yeah.
So and it's still a good album, and it really kind of defines his ability to transfer from what he was doing in the 70s and early 80s to now becoming something more in the late 80s.
And when I said return, I wasn't meaning in like popularity. I meant musically his return.
His return, yeah. Because like I said, it was a 3-year gap, which back then for artists was huge.
Yeah.
Usually if a band was gone for more than 2 years, they were done.
And didn't you say that he doesn't even remember recording some of those albums before?
From Flush the Fashion, Zipper Catches Skin, Special Forces, and Dada, he says he has no memory of.
That's crazy.
And for some of us, some of those albums are in the top 5 or 6 of his records.
Yeah.
Ironically, but yeah, those, like I said, and up to say 78, it was all those albums were recorded drunk.
Yeah.
From 80 to 83, those 4 albums were recorded on crack and cocaine.
Yeah.
So I guess it makes sense that he wouldn't remember them. But there was, again, Constrictor was his first time recording an album sober. And he recorded a concert in Detroit, Cobo Hall, on Halloween 1986, and it was called The Nightmare Returns. I
think I've seen that video.
I have it. I had it at VHS. I don't have it anymore, but it was the very first show he did for the Constrictor tour, and it was the very first concert he ever recorded or ever did sober since 1969. So I mean, it was huge, a huge defining moment for him.
Yeah.
Overall. So that's why I have it on the list. Like I said, it didn't have big hits, but it was
Teenage Frankenstein was a big hit.
Well, I was gonna say a lot of
it wasn't like
the songs
trash kind of hit or a Poison kind of hit.
Those songs that were on that album, some of the songs that are on that album were in the soundtrack to Friday the 13th Part 6. So it had kind of a crossover popularity. But I think that's all I've got for 86.
Yeah, that's all I had.
87, Permanent Vacation by Aerosmith,
which was a fantastic album.
Yep.
Which I didn't have that in my. I had that listed as an honorable mention, but I didn't have that in my top 10.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't. I don't know if I'd put it in a top 10 either.
Because I think Pump was a much better album.
Right, and I have that on the list too. Hysteria by Def Leppard,
which I had at number 3 on my list.
The Joshua Tree by U2.
Great album.
Yep.
Which I just got that on vinyl not too long ago.
Yeah, and then obviously, I think this is the album of the year, probably. Appetite for Destruction.
I would say that's probably not only the album of the year, it's the album of the decade. That's why I had Appetite for Destruction as number 1 on my list.
Yeah, I mean you could argue that, but it'd be difficult to argue that. How's that? You could argue around it, but it'd be hard. So, but that's all I've got for 87.
I mean, as far as like sales wise, I mean it's got to be up there as far as like total sales for the 80s.
Yeah, maybe the top 10 for sure. Of sales for the 80s, if you look at everything.
I mean, that's one of those albums where you look down the track listing and it's just hit song after hit song after hit song. Right. Even the songs that weren't like hit songs are still great songs.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, Mr. Brownstone wasn't a hit, but it's a fantastic song.
Not exactly radio friendly either. Or Rocky Queen, which is my favorite song on the album.
Yeah, Rocky Queen. No, Rocky Queen.
Not
even close to
radio friendly.
No, not at all. Oh. You know.
But yeah,
with the sounds of Axl Rose having sex with
what's her name?
Who was their drummer? Steven Adler. He was having sex with Steven Adler's ex-girlfriend.
Yeah,
in that song. But
nice. Yeah, that's all I got for 87, and I've only got one album for 88 too. And again, these are just the ones that I can remember and going through and going, oh yeah, I remember that album because I did go online and look at looked up albums of the 80s just to see what had come out as a kind of reminder.
I only had one for 88, but go ahead.
Let's see if it's the same one because I only won 2. It's Vivid by Living Colour.
I've got Open Up and Say Ah by Poison.
That was 88?
Yeah, that was 88.
Oh, it's on my other sheet.
Oh,
yeah, okay. I did have that actually. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, because that's I mean, and I wasn't like a huge Poison fan, but that album is so fucking good.
It's another one where like song after song you can. I haven't gone back and listened to that as so much
I have.
As
Actually, I've listened to that I've listened to that album. I'd say within the last 2 or 3 months.
Okay, I mean, it still holds up okay for you.
It does. It does. Obviously, in the last like month and a half, all pretty much Pink Floyd's all I listened to.
Right. I might have had others. I guess I might have had other albums in these years, but I lost a page of.
Yeah, that was the only. That was the only one that really stood out to me in 88.
Right. Living Colour, though, Vivid. I mean,
obviously I completely forgot about that.
That's a good album.
It is a really good album.
And kind of unique because for the type of music that it was and being an all African American band.
And as you talk, I'm actually going to save that to my Apple Music.
So you can remember it? Yeah.
Listen to it later.
It's just very unique because, I mean, African American artists were not doing that. They were doing more of a Prince type of thing, or hip hop was starting to hit the mainstream. But this was a band that was all African American, and they were doing this like hair, hard rock, heavy metal kind of thing, and doing it very, very well.
Oh yeah.
I mean, not to say that they couldn't. It was just unique.
Cult of Personality was a
huge
gigantic
song.
hit.
Absolutely, and again, kind of unique also in the sense that no one was doing socially relevant music at this point.
No.
And that was a socially relevant song.
Absolutely.
So, that,
and it wasn't, I guess, looking back on it, it wasn't really like in your face either.
Right. Yeah, it was subtle. It was definitely subtle, but it wasn't so subtle that you'd miss it, especially if you watch the music video. It's
of course.
It's more clear in the music video.
It is.
But vocally or lyrically and everything else, it's socially relevant, but it's also, like you said, not in your face about it.
Because I think, for 1988, I think had it been, I don't know if it would have been the kind of hit that it was.
You mean if it had been earlier or later?
I mean, if it was more in your face, I think.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think
probably not.
Although
I think 88 was when it was really kind of starting to politically relevant stuff was starting.
You got to think of the kind of people that are running record companies.
Right. Well,
in the late 80s.
This wasn't too far off, and we're talking 3 to 5 years before you've got bands like Rage Against the Machines.
But 3 to 5 years is a big gap.
It is, musically speaking. In the world of music,
there's a lot of things that can happen in 6 months, let alone 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. Well, even more so now than back then, I think.
But I just think that's one of those albums that, even though it is a really good album, had it been more, like I said, in your face, I don't know if it would have been pushed as hard by record companies.
Right. No, it's an album I would love to have on vinyl. I've been looking for it.
If I come across it, I'll definitely pick a copy of it up.
But that's all I actually had. Oh, and actually, I don't know how my list got screwed up. That got popped in the middle of 87. I actually forgot a few 87s.
Oh, yeah? What else did you have for 87?
Well, And Justice for All was 87.
Well, yeah, I thought we talked about that.
We did. Document by R.E.M.
Yeah. That's another band that I was never really a really huge fan of.
Yeah, I love R.E.M. And Momentary Lapse of Reason by Pink Floyd, which you've only recently kind of come to as a Pink Floyd fan.
Yeah, I mean, Momentary Lapse of Reason. I mean, it
was big at the time.
I wouldn't say it's in the top half of their albums.
No, but I'm talking for the time period. It was huge when it came out. And also the very last one was Whitesnake by Whitesnake.
Was that really?
Well, actually, I think the album was called 1987, but
that was really 87.
Yeah, because it's called 1987.
Huh, I thought it was earlier than that.
Nope, that was the big one. That was the one with Tawny Kitaen and the videos and all that. So yeah, the one I had for 80, and I don't know how that got popped in lower in the list or higher up in the list, but so then I guess we could go into 89. 89 was kind of a big year for music.
It was.
Tom Petty, Full
Moon Fever, which I had at number 5 on my list.
Pump by Aerosmith,
which I had at number 6 on my list.
Dr. Feelgood by Motley Crue,
which I had number 7.
Skid Row's debut album.
Oh, that's the one I forgot about, though. That's a really good one.
Alice Cooper's Poison, or Trash. Which obviously, that was his... They call that his comeback album, but that was because that was an album that sold well. It was huge.
It was a more
had a bunch of radio hits.
It was a radio friendly.
It was, and it was ironically, it was produced and co-written by Desmond Child, who also co-wrote and produced "Slippery When Wet."
Huh.
So yeah, and I think Pump, or it was either Pump or Permanent Vacation as well. Desmond Child did one or both of those albums too.
Real quick though, on Full Moon Fever, even though it was Tom Petty's first solo album, all of the Heartbreakers other than the drummer played on that album.
Right, yeah. I know there was some debate, and I was going to put it on here because I think it was 87 or 88, the Traveling Wilburys, because a lot of the material that came from Full Moon Fever he wrote during those sessions, and it was songs that he put together for Traveling Wilburys. But
Full Moon Fever is a fantastic
it's a
album,
great
and it's one that I kind of kicked myself in the ass for not buying, because I saw it for like really cheap one time and didn't buy it. Yeah. And ever since I've seen that, it's been like double.
Super expensive, yeah. Personally, I still think Tom Petty's best album is probably Into the Great Wide Open, and I know that's a Heartbreakers album, but just an overall.
Yeah, I would still go Full Moon Fever.
But yeah, favorite. I mean it's a fantastic record. But like I said, a lot of the Traveling Wilbury stuff or stuff he wrote during those sessions, which by itself was a fluke. And anyway, it was George Harrison was putting together a record. And Tom Petty said, "Hey, you want me to help you, or can I do, sure, come on in." And he's like, "Oh, let's get this guy, and then let's get this guy." And
next thing
before you know it, it's a super group with all these guys.
When they did some really great stuff too.
Oh yeah, the Traveling Wilburys, Volume 1 and 2, because that's really all they did. It was it was just those two kind of that you can get all their songs on one record basically, or a double album. And The Cure, Disintegration, because I remember there being a lot of The Cure being kind of big that year, because I think it was. For me, it was kind of, they were on the periphery enough to almost be pre-grunge, even though they were new wave. But this was them kind of
like new wave emo stuff that they were doing.
But it was kind of transitional.
It kind of laid the groundwork for a lot of the other
the
grunge stuff that came later.
Yeah. And
I think they kind of hit their popularity stride a couple of years prior to that.
Right. Did you see? The Cure was inducted in the Hall of Fame this year. And,
I haven't seen it yet. I haven't watched it.
Well, there was an interview, and the band, obviously they come out there, and this interviewee or whatever, she's like, "Oh my God, it's so exciting! Are you guys excited to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?" Robert Smith goes, "Obviously not as much as you."
That's awesome. Robert Smith's cool as shit.
I know
though.
he is. He's a cool cat, but I just thought that was hilarious.
No, you're right. That is a really good album. That's got Love Song on it. It's got Pictures of You on there.
Yeah.
It's got Lullaby on there. Yeah, it's a really good album.
I would go as far as to say that could be their best album of the 80s, although I think Pornography came out in 81. I can't remember now. And I really like Pornography a lot. For their 80s.
We know you do.
Well, that album too. I'm speaking more of the album right now. We'll discuss my other picadillos later.
That was Pornography came out in 82.
82. Okay,
Yeah.
So maybe that's why I missed that 82 because I was just I don't know. But that would have had that on my list from 82. Let's see what else. I guess some honorable mentions that aren't going to show up on most people's lists. And they're not necessarily defining for the 80s, but music in general, and maybe not so much for their quality, which I would argue is still good, but for their notoriety. Crest of a Knave, because of what it did to Metallica.
Yeah. Obviously.
And it was a huge sell.
It won the first rock Grammy Award.
Yeah, and it beat Metallica, which it shouldn't have.
It shouldn't have, because Injustice for All was, I'm sorry, Ian, was a much better rock album than Crest of a Knave.
Rock album, yes. I wouldn't go as far as to say it was a better album, because it's a good album. They're both good albums.
I would say Crest of a Knave, is a good album. I don't think it's anywhere. I think Injustice for All is a much better album, but whatever, it's my opinion.
It's opinion, of course, and you can't really argue opinion, but as far as for Tull, it was a huge hit. Got radio play. It had MTV play. Ian Anderson was actually on MTV as a guest VJ several times because of that album, and so it was a big album for them, and it had its moment, but again more for its notoriety, what it did for, for the Grammys. It kind of.
And poor Alice Cooper had to sit up there and accept the award while everyone booed him off stage.
Yeah, well, him and Lita Ford together, but I don't think they were booed off stage. There was just okay.
It wasn't very happy.
Yeah, everyone starts to applaud really fast. It slows down and just okay, whatever. But that was one for sure. And Raise Your Fist and Yell by Alice Cooper, speaking of Alice Cooper, which was 87. Kind of continuing.
Which is a really good album.
Which is a really good album. And it continued what he was doing with Constrictor.
Yeah.
But he intentionally, I think, in my opinion, the way the album is and the types of songs on there, it was a protest album. And it was a protest album against the Tipper Gore movement.
Okay.
Against rock music. Because this is at the time when Tipper Gore specifically was going after
the censorship
of vulgarity in music and how it appeals to children. And I think we've even mentioned this on the show before. If you ever get a chance, YouTube the hearings with Dee Snider, John Denver, and Frank Zappa. Dee Snider calls out Al Gore specifically because of his wife and her movement.
Yeah.
But what it really boils down to, it's amazing piece of American history, really, and in terms of debate over freedom of speech. Because
and I think it's a debate that hasn't stopped.
It hasn't stopped, and it's also unique in the sense that you see less of the kind of just talking points, and you really kind of see deep down, because it's even brought up by Al Gore himself as he's questioning Dee Snider. Parents don't have time to censor their children, and so when a child buys these albums, the parents don't. Basically, he was taking the responsibility of it from the parents
and putting it on the artist.
And obviously, putting it on the artist. And Dee Snider said, "Hey, I'm a parent too. I may not have the time either, but if my kid wants to buy this, I'm going to make sure I know what it is."
Yeah. Just be present in your children's lives.
Exactly, which we talked about several times. And it was very obvious. This was kind of that beginning stage where I think specifically the Democratic Party and their political correctness started to really show and hurt them.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just like very unique.
I don't think it hurt them then because they were.
But it's still it's part of what
they were
kind of them.
They were kind of more centrally aligned with the Republican Party at that time.
True, very true. Well, politics in general were more central back then, or centralized back then.
But and it's definitely like you said, it's definitely sparked a debate that has lasted until today.
And Raise Your Fist and Yell overall is an album that. For Alice, I mean, when I say protest, it's not a protest in the sense. There's only one song where he's talking about that specifically, and that's Freedom. But the rest of the album is Alice Cooper, songs that Alice Cooper would write, but kind of upped a little bit to the next degree. And also, there's songs like Give the Radio Back, I'm Going to Step on You, but the aggression is heavier there.
It was there.
You know, like, hey, fine, you want me to put the lyrics of my songs on the back of the album? Here's some lyrics that aren't vulgar, but are going to push the boundaries of taste. How's that? They're going to be gorier. You know, there's a song called Roses on White Lace, and it's about a decapitated bride.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean,
it's pushing. It is a really good album, though.
So, like I said, for Alice, it was probably the only time would ever say he's ever done a protest album.
Yeah,
and that would be it. So,
oh, but
that's about all I've got as far as my list.
Well, here, let me run down my because I actually put together a top 10 list, and tell me what you think.
Okay.
So at 10, I've got Back in Black by AC/DC, which
fair enough, yeah,
came out in 1980. Number 9, I had Pyromania by Def Leppard from 1983. Number 8, I had Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen from 84. Number 7 was Dr. Feelgood by Motley Crue, which came out in 89. Number 6 was Pump, which I think Pump was a really good album.
Yeah, it was.
It was, I mean, Aerosmith had a very public, big drug issue from the late 70s through the mid-80s. Yep. And Permanent Vacation kind of brought them, it was their return. And I think Pump really projected them, and Permanent Vacation was a really popular album. I think Pump really pushed them into the stratosphere as far as popularity.
I would agree, because I mean they were getting all kinds of radio play and MTV play on that album.
So number 5, I had Full Moon Fever from Tom Petty from 89. Number 4 was Injustice for All from Metallica from 87. Number 3 was Hysteria by Def Leppard from 1987. Slippery When Wet by Bon Jovi from 86 was number 2. And obviously, I said it before, Appetite for Destruction was number 1 from Guns N' Roses 87.
Yeah, I mean, the order's fine. I can't argue with any of those being on anyone's top 10. Obviously, it's a personal top 10 to you, but there's nothing I would argue is out of place as far as deserving to be on a top 10 list.
Speaking of Appetite for Destruction, I've kind of been on the hunt for I want to get a copy of The Rape Scene, the original
album cover
on vinyl, and I just I just found out that the reason that there's two versions of it. There was a U.S. version and a U.K. version
of The Rape Scene.
Okay. The U.S. version was only printed very shortly for a very small. I shouldn't say shortly, for a very short period of time, and that's why those are the copies that are several $100s to buy. The UK version, I guess, was printed. There was
for a much longer period
of time, so you can actually get those for like $20 or $30.
Really?
Yeah.
And there's probably no difference.
It's probably a little more than that. It's probably $40 to $50, but still.
Well, yeah, which would be worth it for that collectible issue. But is there any difference between the UK and the US versions?
Album-wise, no.
Cover-wise, I'm talking cover-wise.
No, the cover is the same. I guess there were some different inserts and stuff that were in.
Okay.
There were some stickers in the U.S. printing that wasn't in the U.K. printing, and some other like insert stuff.
Which you're not buying it for that anyway.
I'm not buying it for that anyway.
Right. You've got the collector's edition that was just recently released, which should have all that kind of information anyway.
Yeah.
But
which and as far as like the album itself goes, Appetite for Destruction was probably, I could almost say with certain, was the very first record I ever bought. Like, bought myself.
Okay. Well, it wasn't for me, but I mean, it was up there because, I mean, I got it in 87, late 87, I guess. I always thought I got it when it first came out, but I guess I didn't because we've talked about it. We did it on Entertainment Now.
Yeah.
And based on what you were telling me about that, it would have had to have been later in the year when I got it. So.
It was probably late 87 when I got it.
But again, it kind of a cassette. it was.
Yeah,
I wish I still was buying vinyl, but
I was one of those.
Then I had a Walkman. I listened to everything on my Walkman because I was always moving. So.
I was one of those people that I don't think I bought a CD until I was 18, probably. Right.
Well, I was.
Before that, everything I listened to was all
cassette or vinyl.
Cassette or vinyl.
Yeah, I got my first CD when I was. This would have been 92, so 14. Because I got my first CD player when I was 14.
Yeah. And,
of course, my mom being the overly practical person that she is, you've got a CD player, you don't need your record player anymore. Get rid of it. And took, same with the records. The only thing she let me keep was some of the records my dad had given me.
Yeah.
And that was it. So.
Now you've spent.
Oh, and I bring it up to her periodically to this day about that. I'm like, some of these I had already, and I've got to rebuy them.
Now, if you really think about it, though, over the years, if you would have had them, you probably would have. I would have
lost some of them, and I may even have sold them off for all I know. Who's to say? Because I'm sure that record player I had wouldn't have lasted much. Maybe another 5 or 10 years tops.
But that's all I had. I mean, like I said, the 80s. It was I think a underrated musical era.
I agree. I totally agree.
I think when people talk about rock music, I think that people primarily focus on the 70s, and rightfully so.
The 70s were like the beginning. It was like everything was new.
Yeah, and then I think after that they kind of look at the grunge era and the rock era of the 90s.
Yeah. No, I think the 80s are definitely underrated, and there's a lot of good stuff there.
There is.
People talk about, it sounds so 80s. But that's the point. It is the 80s, and it's got a unique, distinctive feel to it.
I think every decade has a distinct
has its own. It does. I agree.
It's like a lot of the flack that Greta Van Fleet gets is, people say, well, they're a Led Zeppelin cover band. It's just because they have that kind of classic rock sound, I think, is what a lot of it is.
Yeah, that's all it is. They're hearkening to an era on an emotional level, but not they're not copying anything, in my opinion. I really dig them. I was just telling you that I now have their EP, their full EP, and their full LP now. Because I bought that the other day.
They're really good. They're really good albums. Well, anything else to add there, Ian?
No, I mean, that pretty much took up my list. I mean, there's a lot that we missed, too. I mean,
Of course there is.
Even if you get outside of what you would normally consider rock, but as the pop side of things, I mean, Madonna was huge. We didn't even mention Bad by Michael Jackson. That was huge in 87.
Was that really a rock album?
No, but neither was Thriller. And I had Thriller on the list,
true.
too.
That's true. I didn't.
I mean, is it rock? No. But is it not rock? You can't say it's not. It's still in that, under that umbrella.
Rock-ish.
I
would say it's more pop.
Culture Club, Flock of Seagulls that define a very specific time of the 80s.
Flock of Seagulls, you can make. That's still rock.
Yeah, but it's
New Wave was still rock.
Was still rock, but it was still
pop. Really wasn't.
It was to a degree.
Okay.
I would say pop,
I think you're splitting hairs.
I think pop in the 80s was more rock than pop in the 90s and 2000s.
Oh yeah, I'll agree with that.
Okay,
I'll agree.
That's what I'm saying, because there was still a slight blending, and there wasn't such a distinction between the two.
Yeah,
as there is now. Okay, so I mean the 80s. I mean just looking at rock is one thing, but even overall, the beginning of hip hop, mainstream hip hop was there, and just. If it hadn't been for the 80s and all the things that happened in the 80s, those distinctive things that we look back on the 90s, those unique things of the 90s wouldn't have happened.
Yeah,
it was because of things that happened in the 80s.
They definitely laid the groundwork for what happened in the 90s.
Absolutely. So that's about all I got to add to that.
I would just say that, if go out and listen to some of them great rock albums.
Absolutely.
And enjoy them, I guess. Yeah. But that's all I got. Any questions or comments, you can email us at lifeandjournalpod@gmail.com. Check us out on Twitter and Facebook, and that's about it.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, well, until next time.
Talk to y'all later.
Peace.
Play my role, let me tell you about it. This shit right here, man, I'm proud about it. Only real niggas reside around me. Yo, old lady, drop a guard around me. Dip like I know you can, bitch. Show me the ropes like we in the ring. Got you two GoPros, you wanna hang. Shoulder to shoulder, the niggas basic. You know I won't lie. You know that I ain't for that fuck shit. You niggas alright, but I'm way better and she love it. Know that y'all sick as fuck. Here go this tissue, bruh. We taking the dub, hoping you get you some. This hit like a pick me up. She taking my drugs. Know they see the sign. That's some dollar signs. Know they sick as fuck. Know they sick as fuck. Tell them get well soon. Tell them get well soon. Know you sick as fuck. Get well soon.